en el grupo de investigación DEPRO, perteneciente al Departamento de Ingenierías, Química y Biomolecular de la Universidad de Cantabria, y ha contado con la financiación del Ministerio de Educación gracias a la ayuda recibida a través del programa FPU. El trabajo llevado a cabo durante la primera fase de la etapa predoctoral ha dado lugar a la publicación de textos en revistas científicas. Y en una segunda etapa se realizaron 2 estancias de investigación en la Universidad Estatal de Carolina del Norte y en la Universidad de Cornell. Los resultados de la primera estancia dieron lugar a la publicación de un artículo y los de la segunda se encuentran actualmente en revisión, por lo que únicamente esta presentación se centrará en los resultados correspondientes a los 4 primeros artículos. Además, los resultados obtenidos durante esta etapa se han presentado en diversos congresos internacionales y la calidad de la tesis ha sido evaluada por 2 revisores externos pertenecientes a la Universidad Técnica de Dinamarca y al Joint Research Center de la Comisión Europea. Para cumplir con la normativa, uno de los miembros del tribunal pertenece a una universidad extranjera, la ETH de Zúrich, y con el objetivo de cumplir con todos los requisitos necesarios para la obtención del doctorado con mención internacional, se procederá con el resto de la exposición en inglés. Our current production and consumption model is based on take, make and dispose systems where resource extraction is the first stage. After resources are extracted, they are further processed and transformed into products that must often travel long distances to reach their final destinations. This consumption pattern leads to massive amounts of waste. Around a third of the 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste that are generated worldwide per year are openly dumped, and some of it ends up in the oceans. It has been estimated that over 250,000 metric tons of plastic particles are floating at sea. Of course, all of the processes involved in the life cycle of any product generate emissions with detrimental environmental consequences. And one of the strategies that has been proposed to mitigate these problems is the transition toward more circular systems where waste is transformed into a resource. And it is usually assumed that this will lead to a reduction in the consumption of natural resources and in the emission of environmental burdens, but it hasn't actually been proven yet. These are the 9 planetary boundaries that have been proposed as the thresholds above which abrupt, irreversible environmental change with potential disastrous consequences for humans could occur. We have already trespassed 4 of these boundaries, namely climate change, biogeochemical flows of nitrogen and phosphorus, land system change, and genetic diversity. And the growing population makes it even more challenging to operate within a safe space while simultaneously maintaining basic human needs. And also meeting the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the most important of which is ensuring everyone's access to food. So if we apply the concept of the circular economy to organic waste by recovering nutrients from it, we could contribute to securing the global food supply. And it is particularly, the recovery of phosphorus from organic waste is particularly critical because the most alarming estimations indicate that we could run out of it as soon as 50 years from now. So how could the recovery of nutrients from organic waste affect our ability to stay within planetary boundaries? Well, first of all, it could displace the production of industrial fertilizers, which is a very energy-intensive process, and therefore it could contribute to cutting carbon emissions. On the other hand, the application of fertilizers to the soil could also lead to eutrophication impacts, which could paradoxically alter the marine food supply chain. And finally, diverting organic waste from landfills could prevent the degradation of carbon into methane under the anaerobic conditions of landfills. And since methane is a greenhouse gas much more powerful than the CO2 that is produced in the presence of oxygen, it could contribute to mitigate climate change as well. So these challenges are all interconnected, and they are all global challenges, whose solutions should be coordinated globally. However, we could contribute to overcoming them by acting locally. And in the case of this thesis, we took a slightly larger approach by focusing on the region of Cantabria. The organic waste that is generated in the region of Cantabria is collected in the mixed waste stream, where it is transported to the mechanical biological treatment plant of the region, and it is separated of the rest of the inorganic materials and composted. This compost used to have an agricultural application, but after the entry into force of the Spanish Law 22/2011, which is the transposition of a European directive, this compost can no longer be applied to the soil, and it is now called a biostabilized material. The only compost that can have an agricultural application is the one that has been produced from the source separation of organic waste. That directive was recently transposed by Directive 2018/851, which set increasingly ambitious recycling targets. And it also established that by the end of 2023, the organic waste must be either source separated or recycled at source. It's clear that the transition toward more circular systems will help us attain these recycling targets, but we must first ensure that these circular systems are more sustainable than their linear counterparts. And the life cycle assessment methodology can help us do that by quantifying the consumption of resources and the environmental impacts of all the processes involved in the life cycle of these systems, from resource extraction to final disposal in landfill. However, these systems will never be implemented if they are not profitable. So we can use the life cycle costing methodology to obtain a more complete picture of the different sustainability dimensions of these systems. But if we try to separately optimize these sustainability dimensions, we might find trade-offs between them. So there are multi-objective optimization tools that can help us find among the entire set of feasible solutions the ones that are at least better than the others in one of the objectives. So the objectives of this thesis are to propose a methodological framework to determine the optimal configuration of integrated waste and resource management systems under a life cycle perspective, facilitating the decision-making processes, and to test the hypothesis that implementation of a circular economy is a valid strategy to achieve a more sustainable production and consumption model in terms of resource consumption, environmental impacts, and economic profits.